It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Choy, here to provide you with the latest. South Korean Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo has issued a warning to the Japanese government. If Tokyo continues to lay claim to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island, the country will face grim historical judgment. The Bank of Korea kept its key interest rate steady at 1.75% this month and cut its growth forecast for this year, a sign that the economic recovery is still slow. And it's confirmed North Korea fired 2 KN-06 surface-to-air missiles into the West Sea on Tuesday, giving more reasons for the U.S. to bring up the topic of THAAD deployment during its defense chief's visit to Seoul. Let's start with Korea's stern words to Japan over its continued efforts to distort history. Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo has warned Tokyo to stop distorting history, saying that they cannot conceal facts that Japan will eventually face a stern assessment of its past. Meeting with reporters on Thursday, the Prime Minister added Korea and Japan will have to approach the history issue based on objective truth for the future of bilateral relations. This as Japan's state cultural agency is found to be using the name Mimana, pronounced Imna in Korean, when referring to Korean cultural properties. The term also showed up in Japan's recently approved middle school history texts. It is the name of a military outpost that's part of Japanese theory that Japan ruled over the southern part of Korea between the 4th and 6th centuries. Many Japanese scholars dispute this claim. He also said the Education Ministry will be tasked with clarifying the truth behind the theory. More on Japan's latest attempts at historical revisionism. This one stretches back centuries to ancient times. Tokyo is strengthening widely rejected historical claims that it ruled over Korean territory more than 1,500 years ago. Our Jaein has more.
This is a website for the Agency for Cultural Affairs under Japan's Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology. The website introduces Japan's cultural heritage, including a gold crown, a sword decorated with dragon designs, and a wing-shaped crown ornament. They all date back centuries and were excavated from Jongun County in Korea's southeastern Gyeongsangnam-do province during the Three Kingdoms period. The assets, however, are recorded under the excavation site of Mimana or Imna in Korean. The name comes from the theory of Imna by Japanese scholars. They claim Japan established a military outpost in the southern part of the Korean peninsula and ruled over the territory known then as the Confederacy of Kaya from the end of the 4th to the 6th century. The theory is rejected by the vast majority of Japanese historians due to the lack of evidence, but the claim is stated in most of the middle school history textbooks that were recently approved by the Japanese government as a widely accepted theory. In another similar move, some books by right-wing publishers even include unfounded claims that the Japanese Yamato imperial court controlled the ancient Korean kingdoms of Baekje and Silla in the late 4th century, which enabled the ironware culture of Korea to flourish. From modern to ancient history, Japan's distortion of the past has become more conspicuous and persistent, dealing another blow to already frayed relations between Seoul and Tokyo at a time when there are mounting calls for better cultural and economic ties. Jaein, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, Korea's central bank has announced a cut to its growth outlook for this year, citing the slow domestic recovery. But it kept its key rate steady to monitor the effect of 3 previous rate cuts. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
The Bank of Korea cut its growth outlook for the Korean economy this year by 0.3 percentage points to barely over 3.1%. The central bank governor said that the downgrade comes from a slow recovery and weaker exports.
The lowered forecast comes from a weaker than expected GDP in the last quarter of 2014 and lower consumer price growth in the first quarter of this year.
The bank also slashed its inflation forecast for this year to less than 1%, from 1.9% in January, with low global oil prices that are expected to fall even further. The BOK added that so far the domestic economy has shown few signs of improvement, but maintained that consumer sentiment has not yet recovered. And on the interest rate, the BOK left its key rate unchanged at 1.75%, saying that it needs time to monitor the impact of 3 rate cuts made since last year. But some experts say that the current interest rate is not enough to prop up the slumping domestic economy.
The low interest rate only encourages household debt. So it seems that the problem of household debt cannot be resolved with the key rate. Plus, the current rate is not enough to boost the domestic economy.
But not everyone agrees. Some experts say that the economic recovery can't be driven by the interest rate alone, and long-term structural reforms are also needed to stimulate the domestic spending and investment. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
On a positive note, another creative economy center has opened, this time in Korea's southeast, the country's traditional manufacturing hub. The government hopes the new center will modernize Korea's machinery and desalination industries. Our Song Ji-sun has the story.
The 9th addition to Korea's chain of creative economy innovation centers has opened in the country's southeastern Gyeongsangnam-do province. The area is Korea's traditional manufacturing hub, accounting for a quarter of the nation's total machinery exports. The government wants to transform traditional factories into smart factories that are equipped with automated and remote controllable systems as a way of combining machinery and ICT.
지금 세계 제조업은 기계공학과 전자공학의 융합이라는 메카트로니스 혁명을 맞이하고 있습니다. 세계적인 ICT 기술과 강력한 제조업 기반을 가지고 있는 우리가 업종 간 창의적인 융합을 이루어낸다면 모두가 깜짝 놀랄 새로운 부가가치를 창출해낼 수 있을 것입니다.
The center will also seek to foster the water industry into a future growth engine. In line with the initiative's goal of having large companies help smaller firms turn their ideas into businesses, this center will be run by Tusan Heavy Industries and Construction, a world leader in the seawater desalination sector with over $1 billion in annual exports. But in order for these centers to function as startup support hubs, experts say they should be closely monitored and be attractive business propositions.
The concept of sharing large companies' know-how and technology with smaller firms is a creative idea and one that could be beneficial, but there needs to be incentives to ensure large conglomerates want to take part. There should also be measures to track a startup's progress, as they could end up merely becoming subcontractors of the larger partner.
With the launch of all 17 innovation centers set to be completed in the first half this year, the main task now is ensuring that the centers are making substantial contribution to launching startups as the country takes another step toward realizing President Park Geun-hye's drive for a creative economy. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
To those of you who are counting down to the release of Samsung's flagship smartphone, you won't have to wait much longer. The phone offers chic design features and a new mobile payment system that the company says will create new value for its customers. Our Connie Kim files us this report.
Samsung Electronics' highly anticipated pair of Galaxy S6 smartphones is aiming to lure consumers with sleek features and new value when it hits shelves in more than 20 countries on Friday. Jongun, the head of Samsung Electronics' mobile division, said that new value refers to the device's wireless charging feature and the mobile payment system Samsung Pay, which he says will create a completely new culture. The Korean tech giant smartphone also features a chic design. The S6 has an all-metal and glass body, while the Galaxy S6 Edge takes it up a notch with a screen that bends over the edge of the device. For design-conscious consumers, Samsung also discarded its removable battery for a more sleek design. Market watchers expect the new Galaxy S6 series to achieve record sales.
40 million Galaxy S5s and 46 million Galaxy X4s were sold in the first year after their release. We are expecting sales of around 55 million Galaxy X6s, especially with the unique design, considering that there will be no competing smartphones in the first half of the year. There will be demand for such high-end devices.
Samsung sold 73 million smartphones in the fourth quarter last year, while Apple sold nearly 75 million iPhones. Samsung's profit last year dropped 37% on year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The leader of Korea's main opposition party is urging the government to aim for a fair distribution of wealth in order to overcome current economic hardships. Our Park Ji-won reports.
Addressing the National Assembly for the first time since taking the helm of the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy in February, party leader Moon Jae-in criticized the current administration's economic policies. He said the ruling Saenuri Party's policy of favoring conglomerates and the rich is not a remedy for the country's current economic hardships, including income polarization, a record-high youth unemployment rate, and the highest senior citizen suicide rate in the OECD. The party leader suggested that Korea aim for a fair and just distribution of wealth to overcome such problems.
Korea needs to focus on supporting ordinary citizens and strengthening the middle class by ending income and taxation inequality.
He said those in the top 10% income bracket had about 45% of the nation's total income in 2012. He said Korea's growth has been limited due to the wealth gap and urged the government to focus on increasing the earnings of those in the low and middle income bracket, which he said is key to reviving the economy. On the issue of follow-up measures in the wake of the Seoul ferry disaster that killed some 300 people about a year ago, he urged the government to retract enforcement ordinances of a special law about the tragedy. The victims' families claim that the ordinances are standing in the way of an independent investigation into the tragedy. On plans to reform the nation's debt-ridden civil servant pension program, he reiterated his party's position that a compromise among interested parties is more important than sticking to a deadline for negotiations. He also stressed the importance of closer inter-Korea relations.
Inter-Korean economic cooperation is a unique economic policy that only South Korea can pursue.
Under the National Assembly law, the leaders or floor leaders of the main political parties can address the full assembly up to 3 times a year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter arrived in South Korea a few hours ago. He has said the goal of his trip to Seoul is to reinforce the deterrence against North Korea. Just ahead of his arrival, the news broke that Pyongyang had fired 2 short-range missiles off its west coast. Our Na Yeon-kyung has the story.
South Korea's defense ministry says North Korea fired 2 KN-06 surface-to-air missiles into the West Sea on Tuesday. This was confirmed at a regular press briefing 2 days later on Thursday. The ministry's spokesman Kim Min-seok explained the press was not notified right away because the missiles' range is not very long, making them relatively non-threatening. Kim added that the North fires these types of missiles on occasion and that the South Korean military is keeping a close eye on the matter. The news broke a few hours before U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter left Japan for Korea on Thursday. When asked about the test firing, Carter reportedly said this was fresh evidence of how dangerous things are and stressed the importance of the region's strong alliance with American forces. His visit to Japan and Korea this week is his first since becoming Defense Secretary in February. Before embarking on the trip, he had made it clear that the goal of the trip was to reinforce deterrence against North Korean provocations and strengthen trilateral military cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. But local media outlets here in Korea are watching to see whether South Korea and the U.S. will discuss the possible deployment to the Korean peninsula of its THAAD anti-ballistic missile system, also known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Carter will meet with South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu on Friday before leaving for Hawaii on Saturday. Na Yeon-kyung, Arirang News.
And South Korea has reiterated that North Korea needs to engage in dialogue to resolve the issue of a unilateral wage increase by North Korea at an inter-Korean industrial complex in Kaesong. The Unification Ministry said Thursday the North needs to realize the severity of the move, which violates a previous agreement to set wages together, adding the move is putting pressure on South Korean firms. Earlier this week, quasi-government officials from the 2 Koreas exchanged and confirmed their differences on the matter, but failed to reach an agreement. The North decided to raise wages by more than 5% to $74 per month for about 53,000 North Korean workers hired by South Korean firms there. North Korea is holding its first major parliamentary meeting of the year on this Thursday, an event which could offer some insight into the regime's stability. The third session of the 13th Supreme People's Assembly brings together nearly 700 representatives from the country to discuss budget issues and affairs related with legislation. This time, the North is expected to unveil legislation on a new economic policy aimed at improving the livelihoods of the North Korean people. Experts say the session could offer a glimpse into the latest changes made in North Korea's power structure, as the regime could also appoint new officials at top state bodies. And it appears that North Korean leader Kim Jongun has hurt his right wrist. In several photos released by Korean Central TV on Wednesday, Kim was spotted wearing gauze and bandage on his right wrist. South Korean doctors say the injury looks to be minor after analyzing the type of gauze and bandage used, and say it's unlikely the communist leader fractured his wrist. In early September last year, Kim was not seen in public for 40 days, and there was wide speculation that he had surgery on his ankle in Europe that time. And that does it for us at this hour. Do join us again at 10 p.m. Korea time for more. Thank you for watching.